Hello everyone, welcome to another Classic Movie Monday, and today I thought it would be interesting to dive into something that is not necessarily as old, but still kind of, I guess you could say, aging, since it came out in the 80s. And as you can see by the title, that is The Breakfast Club. Now, um, on its face, The Breakfast Club seems like a very sort of standard teen movie. But it's interesting in how little it has going for it, but ends up giving its audience so much more. Uh, because when you look at the general plot, it is about these teenagers that are from different social groups, one being a basket case, one being a burnout, one being a nerd, another being a jock, and a fifth being a princess. So, and I guess that's really technically what they call them as far as cliques are concerned. I don't think we would necessarily call these cliques the same exact thing as we probably would nowadays. But it is about all of these different um, people and that are put, and people by I mean teenagers, put into detention on a Saturday for 8 hours. Um, and they are supervised by um, one of the administrators of the school. And that's pretty much the entire plot of this film. And their goal throughout the day is basically to write a 1,000-page essay about who they are. But that's pretty much the plot in and of itself. And also, one might be asking, what could possibly go wrong in such a scenario? Well, there's a lot of tension at first between the groups, being tensions between the person who represents one group, because again, it's not a group of princesses, it's not a group of burnouts, it's just one burnout, one princess, one nerd, one jock, one basket case. Um, so you do see how they don't particularly gel all too well in the beginning, but as time goes on, they sort of develop this kind of connection and eventually sort of friendship, as a result of them kind of opening up and sharing their experiences. And that's the part that I think people find so fascinating about this film is that even though it doesn't have a very complicated plot, it doesn't have a very epic grandeur story, it still leaves this sort of similar impact, because with its characters and with its execution as far as dialogue and scenes play out, they do show you the amount of struggles that each of the characters are facing. And although these struggles might be different in some way, I think they're somehow identifiable to all teenagers or people who are going through the various emotions that they are going through as they are going through this stage of life. And I think that's really at the heart of the film, primarily. And again, I think what I like about this film too is it tries to break down these like social subculture constructs, especially considering the fact that I felt like that too during high school, that everybody sort of had their own group and they wouldn't really talk with anybody outside of their group. So it's nice to see a film that tries to kind of break down why that is, and and you really do feel like that there is a lot of pressure among teenagers when it comes to their social standing. So again, maybe for some more so than others, but you do really see where each of the characters is kind of coming from, as they kind of sort of reveal their story, and maybe as to why they're in detention, or their family life, etc. Um, But I think it's just the fact that not only do these scenes of them sort of developing and interacting really work, but you do feel like that there is a genuine sense of connection that they ultimately end up sharing, even if they do have maybe their differences. Um, and you do see kind of to the the bad things that they end up doing, and they sort of reflect onto to what they were doing, um, and they sort of open up to each other naturally. And I think that's something that really works about this film. And you feel like that these are teenagers that you would probably encounter in real life. And I think that's why a lot of people, I think, enjoyed this film, because it was a very down to earth uh, teen film, as opposed to a lot of other teenage films that are really like grossly over exaggerated, especially nowadays with like, films like Superbad or Easy A, that are very like over the top, raunchy, comedic. It's nice to see a film kind of like this that sort of brings it a little bit back down to earth, and tries to incorporate maybe some drama into it as opposed to just purely comedy. Um, so I think that's just something that's interesting about The Breakfast Club, and I think that's why it sort of maintains that that um, that that sort of uh, consciousness within film, because it did focus on something that was, I think, really relatable, especially for its audience members being teenagers. And I think even if you're not a teenager, you can still identify with a lot of the things that are kind of going on, and you may even reflect onto back into that time when you were a teenager, and if those things were sort of a part of how um, being a teenager was like. So I think that's just something that's very interesting. And I think again that it has this sort of universal appeal, despite whenever you grew up, even if you didn't grow up in the 80s. So I think that's just something that's very interesting, and is just something that makes it unique. It's not trying to go with what's popular. It's trying to do something that's identifiable. So I think that's why the film really does work, and why I do consider it a classic in this kind of a category that it's in. It's designed to be kind of like a teen drama, I guess you could say, with a little bit of comedy thrown here and there. But as a teen film, so to speak, I think this is one of the few that has stood out over the years, and has been one that a lot of people recognize and remember. And I think it's very understandable. There's good performances from all of the cast. You do feel, again, like they are a representation of their group, but at the same time, you feel there's a lot more to them as the story progresses. So I think that's just something that's really what this film did a good job of doing. And at the same time, traditionally, in detention, usually people don't really get anything out of it, if anything. And for the most part, I think a lot of detention is really stupid and unnecessary. But and I don't know why the teachers would want to do detention, because that means they have to stick around and babysit the kids. I don't understand why. Um, Detention has always been a means of punishment, instead of just saying, well, you failed the class, or you have to take this over, or blah, 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 or you're suspended or something. I don't know. It'll go on your record. I have no idea why they don't do something like that. But I guess apparently detention's still rather popular. But at the same time, um, even though this was a very, kind of just lengthy experience, they still managed to, I think, really get something out of it. And you do really feel that sense of satisfaction at the end, that they did sort of grow, and become more whole of themselves. And in doing so, sort of all become friends. and whatnot. So I think that's just something that's really interesting, and I think really works for this film too. Is sort of how you do feel like that they come out of it not feeling like, oh, thank God that's over, but they come out feeling, like they went through something together, um, and they made it. But yeah, I think that's really all I can say about The Breakfast Club. It's very straightforward uh, when it comes to films. I mean, there's not a whole lot of twists and turns and whatnot, but you do get a sense of certain revelations that end up happening, and you get more into the characters as the story progresses. So that's really the ultimate strength of this film, and I think it just holds up for um, for all of the years that it has been out. So if you haven't seen it, I feel free. And what I've said so far sounds really interesting to you. Feel free to check it out. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you on the next video. Take care. Bye bye.